What's up, y'all? Welcome into a solo edition of SSPN Reacts. Me and Ethan are going to be back tomorrow doing a podcast on what the number one pick means for the coaching future of the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, we think Pop's going to stay around a little bit longer, but we want to dive into what it means for just the attractiveness of the job, moving forward with him, and all that good stuff. But for today's video, wanted to give y'all something, and it's because I caught this article on my Twitter feed from our guy, Jeff Garcia. A lot of y'all on Twitter might know him as Jeff G Spurs Zone. He's been, really kind of on top of Spurs Twitter, been in the game, been doing it for a minute, man. I mean, I remember in high school looking at his tweets. So shout out to Jeff G. And here he has another great article. Tony Parker talking about Victor Wembanyama. I'm not sure if our man Jeff G had to go translate these quotes because it says that Tony was talking to French media. So if that's the case, shout out to him and shout out to him in general for this article because this is just some great stuff from somebody we love to a new man that we love a lot. And that is Tony Parker and Victor Wembanyama. So obviously, y'all see the headline. He has the potential to have a career like Tim Duncan. We've all heard that coming into this, this draft, the lottery. That's why the lottery was, one of the most tense, since the LeBron draft, or that's basically the only thing that people can compare him to whenever it comes to the anticipation of Victor Wembanyama as a prospect. And obviously, before I dive into this is through Spurs colored glasses. But with that being said, as much as Tony, has a bias towards the Spurs and has a bias towards France and has a bias towards Wemby because he played on his team, he's also someone who has watched him, since he was a little kid. We saw the picture that he tweeted out of him in the Tony Spurs jersey when he was a little one. Who knows how old he was in that picture? With those, while there might be some biases there, I still value a lot what Tony has to say, not just because of his skill and his involvement, in French basketball, but also just the fact that he is someone who's been watching Victor and has been evaluating him and really watching him grow up throughout his whole process of where he's put on some weight recently. I know he still looks skinny, but if you go look at some of the tape from the last 2 years in comparison to this year, there's a little bit more muscle there. He's seen all of it culminate where other people might have a little bit more of an outside perspective. So I really value what Tony has to say here. Obviously, I'm a Spurs fan too, so I'm real biased here. But, just in the moment right now, this seems like some good input for sure. So here's what he says to start off. Not to just skip the beginning of the article, but I'm just trying to give you all the quotes from Tony. I feel like it was his destiny. He has everything to succeed, Parker said, speaking with French media. I'm so happy for Victor, for the city, for the Spurs. They have been preparing for 2 years by making moves to improve their position and put themselves in a position to choose first. What is Tony Parker telling you right there? For as much as this, this isn't really explosive, you can kind of see from the outside, but just with how kind of, not to say secretive, but just private, how private the Spurs are with all of their dealings, especially like front office wise. This tells you the Derek trade, the DeJounte trade, those moves were made to be in a position to potentially, have the highest odds to get this guy. And, Brian Windhorst just did a podcast on the Hoop Collective. There's like a 20-minute video out on the ESPN YouTube. Y'all can go check this out. And he was talking about how the Spurs have had Wembanyama on their radar for 4 to 5 years, a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with Tony, but it also has to do with just the Spurs' history in France, and that kind of ties into how the Spurs found Tony. I mean, there's multiple players throughout the Spurs' history that they've drafted from France, whether that be Boris, obviously Tony, and then Jan Mahimi is another one. There's some others I'm forgetting off the list as well. But the point is that for about 2 decades, the Spurs have France has been one of the places they like to go scout. I mean, obviously, we know the Spurs' European ties, but out of all of those countries, it seemed like, at least according to Brian Windhorst, he was basically saying that France is one of their bigger areas. Like, out of all the European countries they go and scout, France is one of the top. So there's a lot of roots there for the Spurs. And so the fact that they've just known about him for so long, I mean, even the decisions that were made in regards to Derek and DeJounte over the past 2 years. It's been something that they were thinking about for a while. That's a long-winded way of saying that, but that's kind of the things that I think about whenever I saw this quote, right? Parker knows exactly what is in the future for Wembanyama after spending 17 seasons with the Spurs. Yeah, he does. He definitely can know what it's going to be like for him to come in. So in San Antonio, he will be in a very, very good environment with Pop. Obviously, like that's something he's going to say. That's why I prefaced this at the beginning. Like this is Spurs colored glasses for sure. But I know he can. I know he can only explode with the Spurs. There's a winning culture there, which will be great for him. I think it's a good team for him. He will really improve there. Right. So that's pretty much like, okay, that's basic stuff. Obviously he's gonna say that. But let's see some other stuff. So we found that's pretty cliche. We found kind of some nuggets here with they've been preparing for 2 years. Although you could kind of figure that out, it's still like they were really going for Wemby with those decisions. That's kind of what that reveals. Um, the pressure, this is another cool quote that I like this. He says the 19-year-old loves pressure. The pressure, he has had it for 13 to 14 years. He had enormous constant pressure and ranked as the biggest talent since LeBron James. When we had him at Asvel, which was the team he played for last year. Just another note, I'm just going to say this because y'all may not know this. Victor's numbers last year at Asvel in the French League, 9 points, 5 boards, and a block. I mean, like not horrible, but not 21 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks like this season. So just a little note on that. We saw that this pressure does not bother him, Parker said when he had him on his team. Moving to the Spurs, moving behind Tim Duncan or David Robinson, the greats who have succeeded in this team, I don't think the pressure is going to get in the way. So he's just saying there, he's going to continue to have that pressure, but he's always had it his whole life. And not to say that, obviously it's not the same media circus in the US or just the media circuit, in France, but he's kind of been that in France. So, when he's walking around and he's real easy to find, he kind of is already that figure, it seems like is what Tony's getting at here. So another interesting thing, but kind of a positive side of that, once again, coming from Tony Parker, but that's some good perspective to keep. He really has had this for a long time. And then this is the last quote from Tony, which is pretty simple here. I hope that with Victor, we return to the top. I hope that he stays healthy. That's the most important thing for him. If he stays, he has the potential to make a career like Tim Duncan. So that's what we all kind of already thought and knew, a lot of it was, but the pressure aspect there, and then also giving us a little insight on the Spurs' decisions over the past 2 years was pretty cool to read. And also just to see what Tony has to say about this, in an official like quote after it happened is another cool thing as well. It seems like there was something else I wanted to talk about also. Oh, well, of course, this part. The injury, health. He's honest there, right? He says that is the most important thing for him. But that's another thing in the Brian Windhorst podcast that y'all can go check out is, I mean, the way he described it is he's done everything in science there is as, at his height, to be able to manage that. He walks on his fingertips and his toes before games. Not saying that's necessarily going to fix everything or prevent every single little injury or prevent, how it's going to feel in the transition to some of the, as much as, you can argue that the EuroLeague maybe plays more physical defense than the NBA, the physical athletes and specimens that he will have to face in the NBA, that is still going to be a transition and something that he just hasn't played against yet. Other than maybe in like some FIBA games and stuff, but just like straight up in the French league. But still, he's doing everything he can. Like, I mean, he's walking on his toe. Foot problems are one of the main concern. Obviously, lower body, but mainly feet with big guys. And he's doing like, I mean, he has a whole routine with band work. It's like a whole thing, and that's what Brian Windhorst was saying that he watched that. He watched him go through that whole routine in France with Brian Wright. And Brian Wright was just blown away. He didn't say anything, but Brian Windhorst could tell when he was standing next to him that when that was going on, it was kind of like a check mark for not just Brian Wright, but a lot of the other teams there when it comes to those concerns. And I don't think that it fully shoos them away, but I think that at the same time, I'm still very optimistic, and I think most people should be. Obviously, people are going to talk about that and always bring it up, and it's a valid concern for sure. Um, but with the stuff that I'm hearing, it's like, man, it seems like he's handling it about as best as he can. And I think, and of course, it's easy for me to say this now that the Spurs have the number one pick, but I really feel like if I was reading that and he ended up going somewhere else, like I would still feel the same way. So uh, all good stuff from Tony there. Tell me what y'all think of what Tony said. Tell me what y'all think of his connections with France in the comments. And just tell me how you're feeling here now that it's Friday and we're 3 days removed from the number one pick and winning the Wemby lottery. We appreciate y'all. If y'all enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button and subscribe below. Thank y'all for continuing to grow us in our subscriber numbers. After hitting 1,000 Tuesday night, we're up to about 1.06K, so about to get to 1.1 already. We appreciate you guys for that. If you want to stay updated with the show, see whenever that podcast comes out tomorrow, and get the link whenever stuff like this comes out, follow us on Twitter at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. This has been SSPN. It's Wemby season. We'll catch y'all later.